Richfield is not fine. So how are you going to deal with this? So a couple notes that I don't have a slide on. So one is, a real estate agent can be a really important member of your team. So the first thing you want to do is get some realtors on your team, and I recommend two different types. One is one that a person just got a license and they're young and they're hungry and they're running all over town for you. They'll go in, they'll take pictures, they'll put you on Skype or FaceTime and say, here's the house, but they don't know that much about negotiation. They don't really understand the process because they're young. So it's also helpful to get real estate agents who have been on the market for a long time that can help you, guide you through all of these things. And one of the things I recommend that you do, and also then do it on a quarterly basis, but initially ask them to pull all of the sales for that town for the last year, all of them. Multifamilies, unless you don't want multis, but multifamilies, single families, all of the sales on the MLS for the last year. And then after that, I want you to do it on a quarterly basis. And this is what I want you to pull for. You're going to ask them, they say, well, what info do you want? Well, let's say everything. But you basically are looking for square footage, how many bedrooms, how many baths. If they have a fireplace, that's nice. Swimming pool, that's nice. Another big thing is garages. You know, what kind of garages do they have? And then you're looking for days on market. How long did it take to sell it? And you're looking for the original listing price. Because I know there's sometimes a lot of steps in between. What was the original sales price and versus what actually it sold for? So you get all that information. Oh, and then you want the style of the property. Is it a ranch, a colonial, cape, whatever, along the way. And if it's by the way, if it's a two-family house, I think you should figure out whether it's a side-by-side style versus up and down. And they'll tell you, it's already built into the system. And if they groan, they should not groan because it's really not that hard. They just go in and plug in some numbers and voila, it's out. Then what you want to do is find out so if you're a rehabber, you want to find out what's the best-selling property in that town. You know, what size, what style, and also how many days is it going to last that you have to stay on the market for. And so you can find the best-selling house on that. And if you're a multifamily house, you want to know that. For multifamilies, rentals. Oh, the other thing is, a website I use a lot is rentometer.com to figure out what the rents are. You use that one too? Yeah. But by the way, they sent out a blog post that says, we were surprised to realize our customers called it rentometer because at our office we call it rentometer, like a thermometer. So I now say it rentometer.com. But you can plug in the address, the number of bedrooms, and what your proposed rent is, and they'll tell you whether that's, they'll tell you the range and whether that's a good deal or not. Okay. So you now know how to do your due diligence, right, for your own areas, and do that. By the way, if you're working in a large town, it might be neighborhood by neighborhood, but go ahead and do that information. And how do you find a good real estate agent? I don't know. How do you find your real estate agent? Ray and Liz, yeah, you guys.
We just cold called him the first house that we got.
Okay, so you just did a bunch of cold calls and then you liked him? Okay. Linda, how did you find your realtor?
Most of the same thing. I call direct when I see a listing that I'm interested in,
Mm-hmm.
and I call the agent directly to establish the relationships with them.
Yeah.
And then eventually you meet some that you really like and you work with them.
Yes. Yep.
And when they ask you, they want to sign an agreement with you, so an exclusive agreement, I just say I'm an investor and, I deal with a lot of real estate agents and I can't sign anything, but I would really like to meet you and possibly work together with you. And, they want the business, so.
Yeah.
You sign an agreement for the property, right?
I will sign an agreement
Yes.
for a specific property and
But
have
that's
no
it.
problem with
That's
that.
what you do,
We
so.
just have to write down, for the
It's
specific
not for an
property.
area or a time
Yeah.
period for that property.
Yeah, that's the biggest mistake new people do is they sign a 6-month agreement with a real estate agent and you have no idea whether they're going to do the right thing by you anyway. So they do have to, by law, they're supposed to sign a contract with you for every house that they take you to. So, and that's fair. I want to compensate people, but I like to have as many as possible. And you do want people to really understand you, and if they complain that you're giving too low of an offer, then they're probably not the right person for your team. And this is kind of tricky because I was calling on a house, and I like to deal with the listing agent also. And I went on Realtor.com, and I found out the name of the listing agent, and I said, please send me information. Then all of a sudden I got about 10 phone calls, boom, 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 none of whom were the listing agent. So I had to go on Google and find her name and find her specific thing, because those ads really work. And so just be aware of that. You're not always talking to the listing agent. So what are you going to do with all this information? So what you're going to do now is going to depend on a couple of things. One is your personality and your skills. So one of the things I like to tell you is whatever you've done in your life, bring that into this business. You know, you're saying you're an engineer, so you're obviously good with numbers and probably measurements and such. So bring that into this business. Whatever you're already good at, do that, so you don't have to learn everything 100%. One of the things I've discovered about myself is that I have no interest in design. I have no interest in rehabbing. You know, I hang out with these three over here, and they could talk about choosing the light fixtures all day long and what's the best style. And and actually, Liz, you sell lighting, don't you?
It's driving me crazy that they have 2 different color temperature lamps in that fixture. And, yes, I'm a lighting designer.
So I found out pretty quickly rehabbing is not for me, but I love to negotiate and I love to put the deals together and then hand it off to somebody, so I'd rather do that. So that's number one. So don't try to put just because somebody tells you you can make a whole lot of money doing something doesn't mean that you have to do that. Find the thing that you want to do. And then knowledge. You want to learn the skills and the trades and the ins and the outs of how to do it. And then the other thing is the real estate market cycle, which I'm going to explain right now. So I showed you a snapshot earlier today, and I was shocked, I tell you, shocked when I discovered this information that since 1818, apparently, we've been running in 18-year cycles on real estate. Going up, going down, doesn't matter. It goes in 18-year cycles, approximately. The only big gap was between 1925 and 1973. Can anybody figure out why?
World War II.
World War II. That's right. You had hundreds of thousands of young men coming back, and they needed a house and they needed jobs. So, regardless of who's in office, this is the cycle that we've been following. So the next part of this cycle that I want to talk to you about is this one, and there are 4 market cycle quadrants. So you take those 18 years, you break it into 4 different styles, and what this chart is not about pricing, though it does affect pricing, right? So I wish I could get this thing. I know. Oh well, I'm sorry guys. Just gonna have to. There we go. All right, I'm just gonna have to point that. So we're in the expansion market. The one that's going across the horizontal says in a perfect world we'd have 1,000 buyers and 1,000 houses available to buy. That is equilibrium. Okay. Anything below that means that we don't have anyway. So it has to do with vacancy versus expansion. So the crash happened over there in the recession. They called it a recession, and they were right. It was a recession as far as the market cycle goes. In the hyper supply area, we had so much speculation going on, which led to that. In fact, I remember, because I've been with CTV for 14 years, and people would call me up and say, hey, we're arranging a bus tour. We'll take all your people down to Miami, for example. Yeah, thanks. But this thing? She's going to fix it. Cool. So they would call me up and they said, we'll take you down to Miami, and we'll take you on a bus, and they would have us invest in a large complex, a bunch of condos or individual houses. And they said, well, we're going to build all these. Here's the model home. If you give us your hard-earned cash, we will use it to build. And by the time you need to pay, we will have found a new buyer for it. And it won't be a problem because the market is going up so fast, we can find a buyer and we won't have to pay 1 penny. Sounded wonderful, except that it was BS. At some point, a lot of people made money, but at some point it just crashed. So that's what you don't want to do there. So let me explain where we are. So, see, that's where we are right now, expansion. So just remember that for a minute because I want to explain a couple. I only want to talk about 2 of them. The first one I want to talk to you about is the recovery area, so you know where we came from. So remember, the crash happened in 2008 or so. So during this period, there's no new construction. Prices are way below. All prices went low. Higher than normal vacancies began to be absorbed, and the banks stopped lending, essentially. And there was no building going on. The reason why no building was going on is that you could rehab a house for a lot less than what it cost to build. So they were selling houses that, for maybe $100 a square foot when it would cost $200 or $250 a square foot to build brand new. So no new construction, and that's the first thing. The other thing was, I don't know if this happened to any of you, but the banks decided to call you up and call back your lines of credit. So, I remember one particular thing. I was at a hotel getting ready to check in. They said, "I'm sorry, your card is declined." So how could it be declined? I just paid it. What's the net problem? So I called them up and they said, "Oh, you didn't get the letter yet." "What letter is that?" "Oh, the letter where we took your credit line from up here to down here." I said, "Well, that's really nice, but I have the same spending habits month in and month out, and I'm about to be homeless because I'm in a hotel. So you better figure out how to increase my line of credit to get me home." So they did. But that's what happened to businesses all across America, is that their need to spend money didn't change. It was always stable, but the banks got really, really restrictive. And that affected us two ways. One, not being able to buy materials, and number two, it ruined our credit scores. Because your credit score is based on usage. So if they give you $5,000 on your line of credit, you're only supposed to use $1,500 of it. If you use more than $1,500, your credit score goes down. So my spending habits didn't change, but now I was using 100% of my line of credit. So it probably happened to some of you guys. So that's what happened. It happened the same thing with mortgages. So fortunately, since 2012, we've gotten out of this. And so vacancies continued to decline. New construction started again because people could afford, builders could afford to start building. You might have noticed in your own towns any new construction happening, and some of us rehabbers are competing against new construction. Certainly there's a lot of big apartment buildings that are coming on. They've been on the books for a while, now they're building them. Prices are rising. Well, they were rising for about 2 years, and then we're going to talk about the slight correction here. But prices were rising where rehabbers would say, "Well, I think I'm going to be able to sell it for this amount," and they'd be able to sell it for another 5%. And that went on for the last 2 years. And how I know this, like I said, is I'm not a rehabber directly myself, but I talked to plenty of them, and this is what they were telling me. Prices are rising because of demand, not because of speculation, not because of oversupply, but just because of good old-fashioned, more people had jobs, more people were confident in the economy, and they were willing to get a mortgage. And mortgages were willing to give mortgages, but still not as banks are not as willing to give out mortgages as they used to be. So the big lender right now is private capital. And by that I mean hedge funds. So the Atlanta market changed overnight. This was about 2 years ago. We went down there to start looking at buying commercial buildings. And we met with this real estate agent. She says, "I've been in this business for 30, 40 years. 6 months ago I was ready to quit because nobody was buying anything. We were out of business." Then these hedge funds came in overnight and started buying houses like crazy, like hundreds of houses every second going, buying houses. It changed the market overnight. And they're still doing that. There's certain, I know in Ohio and some other places where they just came in and they bought tons of houses and they're holding on to them because they know these market cycles. They're holding on to them, and at some point in the future, they will sell them and make a lot of money. What it's doing to the local market, to local people like you and me, is holding down the price and doing something with the rental market. So that's a big. So anyway, we're still in the middle of this. Okay. This is another cycle to look at. So this is an 18-year cycle, and there's kind of a correction in the middle. You see that? It's going up, and then it kind of bumps along, and then it keeps on going up, and then it crashes. So this is where we are, depending on which town you're in and which state you're in. So but that's why I thought the cycle was a good idea. And then once we get beyond this, we should be good to go till about 2025. Now, I might sell my stuff in 2023. You know, you want to stay up to date on these things.